It's great to talk about vibes.
Right.
I mean, now when we're recording it, vibes are absolutely the thing of the moment.
Yeah.
But it's also really, really interesting to talk about how stuff gets made.
Yeah, right.
Ciao, y'all. I'm Jessica Dupuy, guest host for a special TexSom series covering the 2024 TexSom Wine Conference from Dallas, Texas. Join me in the heart of the Lone Star State as we delve into the experiences and insights of key speakers and attendees, exploring career paths, challenges, and the latest trends in the wine industry. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, well, Francis Percival, welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I am so glad that you could join me. Welcome to Texas.
Hello, I'm delighted to be here. I always look forward to my little trips for Texas. For a native Londoner, it's a very interesting, exotic, and at the moment incredibly hot place to be.
Yeah, I have to say, as we're sitting here today, we are in at TexSom, and as part of this TexSom series, we're kind of talking to different people who are speaking or who have been involved in the conference for a long time. And I do think it's pretty fascinating that you agree to come to Texas in August every year.
I think that it's the amazing thing about TexSom is if you want to see the summation of American wine culture, then it's probably the first place I would go to look. That partly Texas is endlessly fascinating. I am still busily digesting the smoked brisket that I ate last night. But I think that the people who come to TexSom, the people you can meet with, you can catch up with, the sort of industry scuttlebutt you can pick up is entirely unrivaled, entirely unmatched. There's nowhere else where you can see everything in quite that way.
I should say out loud that, James Tidwell did not pay you to say that, but I very much appreciate that you said it, because I feel like most people that I talk to who are not even from the United States, they come back to TexSom because of that exact reason. I mean, I met you here for the first time years ago. And I feel like most of the people that I've met in the wine industry that aren't from Texas, it's because of TexSom. So I find that compelling for so many reasons, as you
and I think that's it's one of the reasons that James built it, and I think partly we're looking at the sort of the history of that and sort of the mid-noughties, this idea that if you wanted people to come to Texas, you had to give them an excuse. But I think now it's just developed its own momentum.
Right.
And for me, just the efficiency of if I want to see what's going on in Washington, if I want to see what's going on in the upper Midwest, if I want to see what's going on in New York State, this is just easily the best place to come.
Where you're going to find it. Well, why don't we pause real quick on that, and actually let's give a little summation of who you are. Who is Francis Percival, and why are you sitting with me?
Oh, dear me. A massive fraud, I think. But I am the food editor of a quarterly magazine out of London called The World of Fine Wine, which is long form in terms of the content that we produce. We very much think of ourselves as a cultural journal of wine. So it's not just about, there are plenty of tasting notes, there are plenty of ratings of wines, but it's not really about that. It's about all of the other stuff, which I think is where the interesting things happen in the wine world.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of my wider career, because I am sort of stranded, probably quite similarly to you, in this sort of awkward position between the worlds of food and the worlds of wine. It's an approach to the world that I've tried to take through when I've looked at things to do with the food world, with food systems. And because I'm married into the cheese industry, my wife is the technical director of Niels Jahr Dairy, an affineur and a cheese exporter as well as a cheese retailer in London. And so we have worked together on various cheese projects, a book, Reinventing the Wheel, but also some other endeavors, a conference, things where we've just been looking at the cheese industry that have very much shared a sort of similar idea, this idea of almost popping the hood and looking at what's the actual nitty gritty. How do these things work? I'm very inspired particularly actually, I think in US journalism, when I look at things like the original founders of Vox.com, people like Ezra Klein at the New York Times, who can exist in a space where they're talking about the nuts and bolts of policy.
Yeah.
And that it's great to talk about vibes.
Right.
I mean, now when we're recording it, vibes are absolutely the thing of the moment.
Yeah.
But it's also really, really interesting to talk about how stuff gets made.
Yeah. Right. Well, and from cheese to wine, they all have a process.
Oh,
right?
entirely. And we, I mean, when we talk about cheese, we talk about it as being actually that sort of technical understanding is pretty much the third rail. It's the bit that our agent quite vociferously didn't want us to talk about. It's the bit that publishers, or if you deal with sort of food magazines or things like that, really are quite leery of covering. But it's absolutely, it's the third rail. It's where the power is. If you really want to understand the decisions that people are making and to arrive at a sort of a sensible idea about what might be good, you need that degree of understanding, which in many ways, when you look at sort of a highly engaged wine collector, is somewhere that perhaps with regard to some regions more so than others, but the wine collectors are already there. I do Burgundy collector dinners for a wine importer friend in London, and I am just constantly blown away by the level of detail, technical knowledge, and tasting experience that this collection of wine enthusiasts have. And these are people, they're highly accomplished people. They're bankers, they're lawyers, they're
career people that are in other industries.
Career people in other industries. But they have, because they're highly passionate about this wine region, and which they've visited many times, they have an incredibly detailed understanding. To the extent I'm quite scared if you get into I wouldn't want to get into an argument with them about sort of the soil type in a particular lieu dit or how long a particular producer has been making a certain cuvée. But I think for me it's really inspiring seeing that in a farm-finished agricultural product.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more foods be able to command that sort of respect and enthusiasm from their consumers.
Yeah. It's a very interesting point that you make because, so as you say, so you and your wife, Bronwyn, wrote the book, Reinventing the Wheel, which is not literally the wheel, but it's a wheel of cheese.
It's a pun. It's a pun. That was all Bronwyn. Bronwyn is the
no, but
master.
It's good. But tell me the kind of gist of that book, just so we can make sure that we have all of that, because I love that book.
It is a merry romp through the world of cheese farming, cheese and dairy microbiology, and cheese culture. And I think what would initially appeal to us was this is a way to tell the story of traditional foods where actually the white-coated scientists are not the villains. Because the normal story we tell, and we tell this all the time in wine, is industrialization comes along, someone with a doctorate comes along, says, you dirty, filthy peasants are doing it all wrong, do it my way, and it's utterly catastrophic for the product. It involves this grotesque simplification, and you throw away everything that's good about it.
Right.
What's interesting in the last 20 years has been that now you have microbiological techniques like high throughput DNA sequencing. You can actually study the communities of bugs within a cheese or on a cheese rind as a community. And that suddenly makes the super artisan cheeses the most scientifically interesting, and including it just in terms of finding out really sort of straightforward questions of basic science that we don't really know the answer to about how different microbes interact, whether they cooperate, whether they kill each other, all of these sort of different things. But also it gives us an understanding that we can now demonstrate scientifically, for want of a better word, of how these pre-modern techniques are really, really clever.
Yeah.
They're really, really smart in a way that the sort of the annihilationist approach of the 20th century, this idea that I'm going to have a kill step early on in my product, and this might be a wine, this might be cheese, this might be whatever, and I'm going to get rid of everything I don't want in it, and then I'm going to reintroduce the single strain of microbes or the single high production cultivar or whatever. I mean, it's the same mentality if you're just going to saturate everything with synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, then go from there. And that's just this appalling simplification if what you care about is the interest of eating, the sort of organoleptic quality of this thing.
Right.
But it's also just really boring if you study it from a perspective of trying to understand what's going on inside it.
Yeah.
And so we were trying to
shine a light on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bring these out into a sort of a public conversation, public discourse.
I love that. And I definitely think it's a great read, especially if you're not in that world. It kind of gives you a different perspective.
Oh, we spent ages trying to rewrite it to put sort of dick jokes in and to try and make it so that it was something that you didn't have to. One of the biggest questions I get, I ask myself whenever I'm doing something is, how can I make sure that someone doesn't have to be either taking an exam or being paid to read this? It's got to be something you take to the pool.
That you want to, read it. I love it. Read it at the pool. So let's switch, because there's another thing you're very, very deeply involved in the wine world, specifically with World of Fine Wine. So in addition to working on being the editor on food for them, you also help really do a big project, which is curating this best wine lists of the world.
The world's best wine list awards. So it's now we've been doing it for 10 years, which is amazing in itself. And I think is just this endlessly fascinating glimpse into a snapshot of wine-orientated restaurants around the world. It's something where for a restaurant to actively enter, it's a sign that they take wine seriously.
Yeah. So someone has to enter. So tell me, what's the process and what's the best? Like, how do you determine?
The best is a lot of long and bitter arguments and different score sheets. And it is surprisingly time consuming, actually, to assess wine lists, particularly at the high end. And I think one of the biggest tensions within the awards, and one that we're constantly trying to address, is if you have the resources, if you are well capitalized, it is easy to put together a list of great wines. You can buy them. Your accountant will tell you how much to charge for them. And then you have some operational challenges in terms of how you run that wine list, how you're going to have a team doing wine service who can sell these wines.
Yeah.
But far, far more interesting, and I think I would say the thing that we look for most is putting together something where we can get a sense of a creative intelligence behind it.
Okay.
Instead of trying to have one of everything, you're fulfilling that sort of editorial role, and you really get a sense of the best lists. You get this fascinating sense of the personality of the person who put it together. Sometimes I think many of the best lists are from those restaurants that become institutions and then have the advantage of having been operating for 20 or 30 years. And there you can even see, it even becomes an exercise in archaeology. You can see different wine directors as they've been and gone, and their different passions, the little Easter eggs that they might leave in there for sort of curious or highly engaged customers. And that for me is tremendously fascinating. It has been fascinating to see that for a 10-year period, so that we see as the wine world becomes ever increasingly more multipolar. There isn't one wine conversation going on now. There are 20 different wine conversations. Seeing how restaurants engage with that, and many do it in a tremendously sophisticated way. So even, I know, they might be really strongly naturalista, super natty wines at the sort of the entry level of the price point. And then if you pay a little bit more, you've got an incredible sort of collection of very classical names that are inevitably a little bit more expensive. And it's clear you have two quite profoundly different conversations going on.
Right.
And selling those must be quite interesting, because it becomes this question of sizing up what actually does my customer want.
Yeah. But the other thing I wonder, and I'm sure you guys go through all of this, so this is why I'm curious about it. I mean, you're from London. I'm from the States, so big cities here, not particularly, classic wine growing regions. I mean, except for the Napas and the Sonomas and things like that. But in other countries, if you're talking about awards for the World of Fine Wine, like restaurants around the world, how are you taking into account that big cities maybe in Italy or big cities maybe in France might have that big diverse menu, but then these smaller towns or how does that factor in?
So one of my very favorite awards that we give is for best wine list within a region.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Because I think that's where, as a wine director, you can be astonishingly influential.
Yes.
On the one hand, Press in Central Italy is a perennial winner of that category because they do a really good job. But you're at once offering a window onto the region for visitors, but you also, if you're the wine-orientated restaurant in a perhaps a smaller market that you might be, you are the canteen for local winemakers. And then I think the really the smartest restaurant lists like that are essentially running two programs. That there's the collection of the local great and the good for the tourists. So the sorts of places where we would drink if we were going in there. But there's also the collection of wines from places that aren't in the region, but that might have something to say about the world of wine to winemakers who are operating there.
Yeah, who want to know.
And that I think becomes super interesting. I always feel, and James Tidwell, who's a fellow judge at this competition, I think always feels that there is that element of unfairness about sort of some wines don't go into other markets, and we should be looking at the job that the individual wine director is doing with the wines available to them because of whatever political decisions, whatever agreements about distribution. Or I think that the service of the awards is really for the consumer. And I think the interesting thing to say to people is this in the world is where the most interesting lists are.
Yes.
And so, you're not, if you want an amazing selection of wines from northern Italy, then Verona might be a good place to hang out. If you want to drink the wines of Champagne, in fact, it's something that I'll be featuring with our sparkling wine seminar that Peter Leem and I have done at TexSom this year, then Le Crayère is sort of the restaurant that has all of the champagne. And so then the super interesting thing about it is, how do they organize it? What do they think is important about these champagnes in an environment where they have essentially two wine lists? They have the wine list of champagne and then the wine list of not other wines.
Of not champagne. I love it. Yeah. Well, it is a really good question. It is a fun list to always read through. And of course, someone like myself who loves to dine out and spends half of her time writing about food too, I think it's a really, it's a great way to kind of, make a list of, okay, when I go here, I want to eat here, that sort of thing, but also to drink the wine. So I love that. When does that come out every year? Just so everybody can look.
The big ceremony is in the middle of September.
Okay.
So I think the deadline for submitting lists is normally sometime in March.
Okay.
And then that gives us, and it does take that long then to get through and judge and arrive at a decision.
One of the things you mentioned when we sat down is kind of like you're in the season of conferences. So this is wine, what we're doing at TexSom, but what else is going on?
So I came to TexSom from the conference that my wife Bronwyn organises in Somerset in the southwest of England on the science of artisan cheese.
Okay.
And the timing just worked that it was basically packing up there and then come directly here.
Hold on, did you bring cheese with you?
For once, I failed to mule any cheese across the US border.
Okay, sorry, keep going.
And there I was chairing a panel on historically informed technique, where we'd gathered together two British cheesemakers who were working with early 20th century, late 19th century recipes, who've been involved in a lot of research into what were their cheeses like during that era, which is probably sort of the pomp of the British cheesemaking industry. And we brought them together on a panel with Sir John Eliot Gardner, a British conductor who was one of the founding figures, one of the driving forces behind historically informed performance in classical music, biographer of J.S. Bach, and a very thoughtful presence. And I think that was tremendously interesting and reflected in a lot of the things that I do, certainly with respect to wine projects and with respect to the book about cheese, Reinventing the Wheel, of this sort of instrumentalist use of history, this idea of using the past as a repository of sort of roads not taken, of ideas that we can use. So we're not trying, like an antiquarian, to faithfully to recreate sort of this is what a historic cheese tasted like.
Right.
But we can say, actually, this is how they made cheese. And some of these techniques are actually very interesting for us now, and we can embrace them. We can see what a modern retelling of these sorts of cheeses might look like. So I came directly from Somerset, worrying about that. Now I'm worrying about wine, and particularly this sparkling wine seminar. And then as soon as I land, so I'm very, very much hoping that the dear folk at American Airlines do not have a major flight delay. I have to rush off to Romania, to Transylvania, to go and look at high biodiversity hay meadows in Transylvania, which is fascinating. Again, one of these things of sort of raiding the past for ideas. And I think there's a lot of Eastern European research around some of these sorts of ideas, that mainly because, I mean, Ceausescu could never afford the chemicals.
Right.
And so they are places that are almost like a time capsule, where the 20th century changes in agriculture didn't happen.
Okay.
And where you have now these astonishing natural resources. And I think we've got this slightly sort of mutually, I hope, supportive and overlapping set of curiosities, in that I and my wife am very curious about what can we learn from the farming and the management of these meadows, and they, I think, are very curious about how can we actually make this into economically functional biodiversity, because it's all very, very nice having it as a tourist thing. But the idea of what can we make, and I think they're particularly interested in cheese, that would allow you to capture this story and have a sort of the tasteable narrative, the thing that a consumer can actually consume, the thing ultimately that can be exported out of Romania and engaged with by a global market.
Yeah, other parts of the world. That's really fascinating. So let's zoom back to your middle thing there. For TexSom presenting with Peter Leem, you would assume, champagne, we're just going to hit smack dab right there. But you guys, are presenting.
If you'd seen Peter's initial selection of wines, that was very much the survey that was proposed.
So you had to broaden his mind about sparkling wine. Is that how?
Peter is wonderful and incredibly knowledgeable, and is the most deeply embedded person I know within the Champenois wine industry. He's got a house in Epernay, but as one might guess, not a lot of global sparkling wine comes into champagne. And so that, I think, becomes interesting. And I think for us, it was also this interesting tension, because you can think of a survey as being, a basic introduction to places, or you can think of it as this is a chance to talk about a snapshot of these other things that people are worrying about now. We're not pouring any cava, and I know that I already know that some of my fellow speakers here are going to be a little bit annoyed at that, and there'll be questions from the floor. But what we are doing is discussing extensively, in terms of the sort of the technical decisions you can make as a winemaker, the position of sparkling wines and climate change. We're talking about, I think it's something that my friends and colleagues at Arini talk about a lot, this sort of tension between luxury wine and fine wine, and both of those terms that sort of make me feel a little bit awkward, even if I do work for a magazine that has fine wine in the title. But this idea with things like, how do you create a prestige cuvee? This is hugely a question of the moment in the world of English sparkling wine, as people are moving to multi-vintage blends.
Yes.
And then this idea of where does that sit against, say, a single vineyard wine.
Right. Which is interesting because, so the premise being different styles of sparkling wine, right, for this. There is a prestige cuvee being released or being shown in this one from English sparkling wine. Is that correct? I happened to talk to Laura Reese the other day. So.
Laura's been a great supporter of the tasting. The 2016 Gusbourne prestige cuvee, so they're 51 degrees north.
Yeah.
And that is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
One, to show it to this audience with some other pretty serious wines. I mean, things like the Louis Roederer, the Stark, their Brut Zero, their undosed champagne, and I think it will be interesting in that context, talking about all of those sort of sets of decisions that go into making a prestige cuvee, and it's very much not just, okay, we're going to select some of the nicest lots and then give it a extended lees aging.
Right.
Where that then fits within the culture of sparkling wine globally becomes a sort of a fascinating question. Sparkling wine has this amazing commercial position that sparkling wine, and in particular champagne, owns celebration.
Yeah.
And every marketing director of every other winery in the world would love to own celebration. That the idea that pop is in itself. I mean, there's an emoji for it. People are celebrating. Yeah. And the problem with that, so champagne, sparkling wine, they are the expensive wines that people who don't really know a lot about wine or who aren't really into wine will buy.
Yeah.
In the US, it's sometimes difficult because some states sell wine in supermarkets, some states don't. But if you go into my local supermarket in London, the difference in price between the most expensive champagne, which is also a nice sort of economic barometer there, sort of is how expensive is the most expensive champagne in your supermarket versus the most expensive still wine, is almost certainly a factor of 10.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's not just wine geeks who are buying these things. Yeah. And I think that's amazing, and it's amazing for the Champenois, and it's one of the very few regions in the world where you can make a healthy living just selling grapes. But it's also this sort of cultural tension, because I think there is this sort of profound impetus that these are serious wines, these are gastronomic wines, these are wines you should be pairing all the way through your meal. Yeah. How you get to have your cake and eat it. Right. As a producer, as a region, as a style, becomes, I think, this sort of super interesting question.
Well, it is interesting because, okay, so you've said there's not going to be cava. Sorry, cava, we'll do something later. But champagne and English sparkling, talk about some of the other styles or regions that were included.
So for our pet nat, we're going to California with Michael Cruz, who I think is one of the most thoughtful American winemakers. He's certainly when it comes to sparkling wine, he's one who has been most deeply embedded within the world of grower champagnes, and is very much making wines along that style. And so it became this very interesting idea that pet nat, which so easily can be this sort of slightly sweet, somewhat throwaway sort of, if you think of, bougie or something like that, Savoie, something you drink by the pool, and it's off dry, and it's fun, but it's not particularly interesting. With his wine, I think the question really becomes how serious is pet nat, or is the most interesting thing about it, because you've got this fermentation continuing. What it gives you is this amazing seasonal wine. Yes. This wine that tastes different as time progresses in a very, very active way, not in the sort of the passive aging, but that actively this biological process is evolving very quickly. And I think that's going to be very interesting. I think a lot of our discussion is going to be around sort of how ancestral is the method ancestral. And I know Peter definitely has some opinions about that. Right. And then we'll pour some Lambrusco. I'm a little bit sad. The Lambrusco is going to be delicious and is one of the world's most gorgeous gastronomic wines. I'm slightly sad that we're not pouring Aussie Sparkling Shiraz, simply because we see it in London a fair bit, because there is quite a healthy expat Australian population, and they need something to drink at Christmas. Yes. I'm not sure how much of that comes into the US.
We don't see very much.
And just as a style, I think it is again an endlessly fascinating thing to introduce to people, and something that has a profound heritage within Australia.
So
there I will hold my hand up and say we slightly missed a trick. Although it is also the sort of thing where if we're going to pour one of the bigger names, I fear that we would probably pour the entire US allocation at one tasting.
Exactly, because there's really not much. But personally, selfishly, the Lambrusco I think is a great selection because it's such a spectrum of what you can find within that category, and I think it's an exciting place, particularly for consumers as a food wine, to kind of open their eyes to a whole different range, whether it's even white Lambrusco. You know what I mean? Like
entirely. My Californian brother-in-law, and who I use as this sort of person who very much is my sort of geriatric millennial sort of barometer of how far things have got. It's interesting that sort of progression. I think it's something we talk about a lot within all of these industries. How do you recruit new consumers? And for him, it's that where he is in the Bay Area, he has a very nice local pizza restaurant, pizza place.
Yeah.
And he's just had their second kid, no time getting takeout, or if they're taking their sort of their 4-year-old and their 6-month-old out off to pizza because that's relatively child friendly, and within that environment to be introduced to, as you say, the range of Lambrusco is fascinating.
Yeah. Does he?
He adores it.
I love it.
He's super into it. He pours it when we go around to his house without sort of thinking. And that's, I think, is the beauty of a lot of that of sort of the millennial and younger consumers of Lambrusco, because they're taking it entirely for what it is, rather than dealing with 30 years of horrific wines and the industrialization of the region.
Exactly. That initially got to the States in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're seeing so many other great things. So I think that's really exciting. Well, Francis, I appreciate your time. It's always an enthusiastic, engaging conversation with you. Like, I learned so much, and I always feel like we need to kind of like spend another 2 hours.
Yes. No, I think
so many things you can talk about, but it's also funny. Selfishly, this is a great series for me because at TexSom, inevitably, you say hi to 1 million people with the hopes and dreams that you might be able to catch up with them for a few minutes, and then that time never presents itself. So I get to actually have that with you. So I'm selfishly grateful.
Fantastic! Thank you very, very much for inviting me. It's always fun to chat and catch up.
Well, I look forward to next time. If not at TexSom, then at the TexSom Awards.
Indeed.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.